In the early 90s, I met someone who is a dear friend today. Lenore and I met at a PR agency that I worked with and instantly connected and shared a bond. We would go on to spend the next couple of years while I lived out west doing so many things together, parties, balloon rides, running up the Vancouver Tower, which I can't remember what it's called now, um, going to cabins, and doing all the things, the crazy things that 20-year-old girls are wont to do. Lenore was always so positive and energetic and optimistic, and I love that about her. And then the day I was moving back to Toronto, to Ontario, Lenore, who offered to take me to the airport, we sat on my deck and we had a glass of wine and enjoyed my last view of the mountains before I left. And ironically, that those last few hours, we ended up by sharing some really personal stories with each other. And that was when I learned that Lenore was the victim of David Snow, Canadian serial killer, also known as the cottage killer. And her story was horrible to listen to, and the trauma that she went through was unrelenting. Now, fast forward to a couple of decades later, and Lenore has a therapist. She's sharing her story. It's something she didn't talk about for decades. And through sharing that story and building her community, she's been able to really kind of face this and establish coping mechanisms. But she's a no bullshit person. She doesn't pretend like it's all in the past or that she's a heroic. She's honest that there are some really dark days and then there are some good ones. And I love that Lenore is using her experience to tell these stories, to help other people and to give other people hope. But it's also helping her. And this is something we see so much in midlife that women, find the strength and courage to really take these challenges on or to hit things that we might have run away from, like head on. And that's exactly what she's done. And I am always so proud of her and really grateful that she agreed to join me on this podcast episode to talk about, the things she's learned, the way she's coping, and the strength and tenacity that it has taken, and the power of community to help her get through this. So please tune in and have a listen to my conversation with Lenore. Lenore, my good friend from the West Coast, I asked you to join me for this episode today. And it's a tough one. This is a very challenging topic for you and for me. As you know, I talked to you before about the fact that the season of the podcast, the She 2.0 podcast, is about women who have found their power and their courage and their strength in midlife to make pivots in their life that benefit them. Lenore, when I met you 35 years ago,
Yeah.
you had a big secret. And I didn't find out about it until I was leaving British Columbia, Vancouver, to move back to Ontario. And that was a secret that you kept for a long time. And it's been in the last couple of years that you've really started to open up, talk about it, and share your experience so you can help other people. So, on that note, can you tell me a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Well, the secret was the fact that I was a victim of crime when I was 21 years old, and I had just moved to Vancouver. And my goal in life was to be a journalist. I was working in a job sort of related, but within 3 months of being here, a bad guy came in and decided that, well, he had done his research. He knew I'd be alone and he robbed me, but then further decided to kidnap me and take me to his camp that he had 8 kilometers away in the woods. And I guess that whole thing was, it's just not something to talk about in general conversation. The good outcome is that I survived. He was caught, but it was a 9 day ordeal. And you can imagine over 9 days with a psychotic individual, it's not a picnic. There's certainly some bad things that happened, and I was hurt physically and maybe what's worse, mentally. And I carried that for many years, but I also carried a energizing feeling of the fact that I felt very lucky to be alive. And when I had worked with you at the PR firm, we had a very strong connection. You had interned there, and I was in my career building job doing, I think, reception and sort of assisting. And yeah, you were moving back, and I think you shared with me some stuff about your life. And I just never thought anybody'd be interested and, almost kind of feared it. And it was a bonding moment that we had for sure.
Yeah, it was. Can I just sort of talk about my own experience with you?
Absolutely.
And why that story was so surprising was because we had been hanging out so much. We met at Weber Shandwick.
Yeah.
This is how old we are. We are launching the $2 coin. Do you remember that? And it wasn't over 30 years, it was like 26 or something. Anyway, you are always so positive and optimistic, and you are a go-getter. And like, I remember that's when your idea of Planet Girl first originated, was
Mm.
all those years ago. And you are smart and funny. And I was blown away when you told me this story because I would have expected someone who had that experience to be so deeply traumatized that they may never come out of it. And you were just the exact opposite. And I like cannot believe and I am in awe of your courage. I always have been. I think a lot of people could easily just crumble over something like that. I know I personally could have, but why I want to share that today, and we don't need to go into details, is that all these years later, we are not girls in our 20s hitting the bars and going to cabins in the Okanagan. Uh,
Rooftop firework parties.
yes.
That's fun.
We're in our midlife journey now. And
Mm.
that experience has come up for you and in a very positive way. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Well, it wasn't positive in its manifestation. I will say
No.
that. And I guess, yeah, that story, not telling it, made me sick. And I did not feel its impact until about 22 years after the fact it hit. And that would have been, well, about 9 years ago, I got really sick. And physically and mentally, my body was just melting down. I had stroke symptoms and cancer symptoms, and my hands looked like they were inside out. The eczema was so bad, and my emotional state was just plummeting. And I had I guess, a 4 or 5 year old daughter at that point too. And when I went to my medical doctor, or the multitudes of doctors, family doctor included, to find out what was going on, thinking I'm dying, thinking I'm not going to raise my child. The only conclusive thing, if you want to even put it in that way, that my doctor would say is that, oh, you're normal. This is just perimenopause. And there wasn't a really discussion on medication and stuff. For whatever reason, I didn't trust that it was that definitive. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And that was, again, 8 or 9 years ago. What changed everything is when I was forced to see a psychologist because I just wasn't doing well. My job was suffering, my life was suffering. And there was an incident that happened related to the crime where I was basically publicly outed. A book was published and had my name in it, and it wasn't supposed to. And it was very hard to have that and feel so exposed. So all of that said, I went to see the psychologist, and I went in with a chip on my shoulder and not trusting. And she introduced me to PTSD, and she said, I think you have PTSD. I laughed and thought she was just like all the other wackos. But eventually she taught me that, yes, I was carrying a pretty big story, and it needed to be released somehow. And we've worked on that. And I still see her 9 years later. So the reason I tell you all of this is because 9 years later, real perimenopause is here. So, it's fascinating to me to see how dangerous this can be for people unless you really just trust yourself and are wanting to find your own answers. In my sense, I could have gone down the road of certain therapies or diagnoses that wouldn't have scratched the surface, and I wouldn't be as healthy as I am today.
Mhm.
So it's intertwined with this midlife change and decision, and it's all part of the story for me anyway.
What I mean is the pivot, it really forced you to open up about it, but not just that. Since then, you've done a TED Talk, you're leading women in this area, you're talking openly about it, about trauma, about survival, and you're helping other people know that they can talk about it too. Because, like you said, you felt it wouldn't be interesting, but I think, we don't trust other people with our pain. And I think for you, I feel like you've changed trajectory in your life, and
Yeah.
partially due to the emotional release and also seeing the opportunity to use this to help other people.
Yes, well, exactly. And it's something I've been forced to do. I'm living my own therapy, and motherhood has been a critical decision maker in this. I'm not certain. And my daughter wasn't planned. I was told I'd never have
I
children.
remember that. You are
Yeah.
a miracle. Yeah, she is a
So
miracle.
she, as motherhood does and parenthood does, it really opens up so much vulnerability in your mind because for the most of us, I suppose, having to have this responsibility to keep this being alive is just, it does a whole number on you. And I that forced a lot of walls to come down, like just destroyed them. In that was all part of this process. So yes, motherhood, the PTSD stuff, that manifestation, it's come to a place where yes, I guess the storytelling is helping other people, and that's a wonderful offshoot. But the main focus, selfishly, is to keep myself alive and to have a proper relationship with my daughter and not pass this on.
Is
So
it
to just, I've always, for some reason, have this ingrained in me to keep moving forward. And that's all part of it. Yeah, I'm just keeping pushing the storytelling because the more I tell it, the more I learn about myself, the more I find a way to tell this horrible story that is just it's a lot of salacious, ugly bits in there, just fodder for the true crime scene. And the journalist in me never wanted that to be the way it was told. So I suppose this is my way of doing that. And I'm figuring it out as I go, and I have no idea, but it's making me feel healthier.
So I would say to the journalist in you, you're looking at motherhood and the role that you play and how you're raising your daughter and role modeling and preventing her from any sort of exposure, I guess, to trauma. But what I see is your daughter is being raised by someone who survived, who has shown tremendous strength and fortitude and resilience. And I know personally from knowing you, you do not have easy days, but you keep moving forward. And I think that's why, before I knew anything about this, I just saw you as this incredibly positive, productive person. You're creative. And I think that's where you and I started hitting it off right away. You just seem so full of life. You do seem full of life. And I love that. When we hang out, we laugh and we have fun, and you're so easy to talk to. Your daughter's getting that too. Like she's getting that experience. And I don't know what the plan for the future is for conversations with her about your past, but I know it's a public story now. But, I just look at it and think, if I was your daughter, I would be like, wow, my mom kicks serious ass. Like, that was a horrible thing. And here she is, strong, guiding me, coaching me. That takes tremendous strength and bravery. You have to admit it.
Well, motherhood is bravery, isn't it? Nobody gives us a manual. and single motherhood on top of it, with the challenges that we've had with my ex-husband having a stroke when I was 11 weeks pregnant.
I
So
remember
so
that.
that, it all adds to it, right? Trauma has its way of just piling and we don't know which one to focus on, right? So can we blame everything in our life on one thing? Not necessarily, but we have to find a way to own the pieces and make sure they don't get too heavy. But yeah, in terms of my daughter, I don't really know what she knows. We haven't sat down and talked about it. She certainly, at 15 years old, knows how to use Google. She has mentioned in places that she's talked to her friends about what I do. Like they are doing some interactive projects and they have to do these little creative stories. And one of her friends is doing one on a kidnapping. And she said, "Oh, you could ask your mom these questions." So it's become like that was a big fear. Like, once she knows how to Google, is it going to just wreck her seeing this, right? Because we hadn't even talked about sex yet or anything. But so far, it hasn't even been the issue that I was manifesting in my mind. She's a neurodivergent girl too. She's high sensitive and got a unique intelligence and sass about her as they do. But yeah, so she's taking it all in. This is her normal. Mom's out there talking
Yeah.
trauma. So
Talking trauma. You talk trauma, I talk vaginas. Who knew 25 years
exactly.
ago this is
I
what we
think
would be talking about?
exactly. I know.
She's going to look at you and relate it to that experience and see that there is this positive message about survival in there, as opposed to just reading this without any sort of
Yeah.
context. She sees how you're doing, she sees how you cope and how strong you are. So I think it will be a productive conversation you have.
Well, there's this whole intergenerational trauma conversation that we are all privy to in many aspects of our world. And I haven't really ever looked into it, but I mean, with my daughter, before I even was talking about it, as a child, she had this intense fear of the bad guy that was going to come in and the bad guy that's outside. And, just this hyper intense fear. And it had not even come out of my lips yet. Right. And for whatever reason, I don't know where that came from, right? Psychologically, I haven't done any digging into that. But I have a sister, half sister, who's 26 years younger than me. We're not close. She lives in Alberta still. She is taking kind of a film production journalism type thing right now. And she had an assignment to do a compelling interview. And we've never talked about it. The people that support me least in my whole journey are my family. Nobody follows what I do. Nobody likes and shares anything. I get it, but I'm not going to lie. There are times when it's hard to take, but I also get it. It's hard for my family, right? Particularly, my dad and stuff. Anyway, my sister doing this project, she interviewed me for well over an hour, asking some questions really in detail about what happened and the kidnapping and where I am now. At the end of it, she says, "Why have we never talked about this?" And I'm just like, "Well, why would we?" But in terms of this intergenerational trauma, her and I didn't even grow up in the same house or same city. And she told me for the first time then that she used to, again, it wasn't talked about in the house. She knew nothing about it. But as a kid, she was always waking up and having nightmares and running into her parents' room screaming that there's a bad guy coming to kidnap her.
Wow.
So, like, I don't know. I don't know what that all means, but maybe talking about it, like you were saying earlier about the helping piece, it's helping me. And my hope is it's helping my family. And my hope is, with others, when they're ready to hear and look at their own story, like we learn from stories. We learn from when
Yes.
somebody else says, like you and I experienced, right? You shared with me some stuff in your life, and I went, you know what? For the first time, like out of all the parties and fun times we've had, long road trips, I was like, hey, I can relate. Here's a
Yeah.
so, but we learn, and then it's like, I don't know. It takes a real weight, I feel, off a person when we feel like we're not the only freak that went
It's
through
not just
something.
that, it's that I feel like when you tell a story like that, like when you and I talked that day,
Yeah.
you feel heard all of a sudden and
Yeah.
you're saying it out loud, which changes the story a little bit because
Yeah.
sometimes when you keep things to yourself, you wonder how much is in your head, how much is reality, how much you're remembering, and how you're maybe being overly dramatic, not you, but me. And when I
Yeah.
tell talk about stuff, I realized no, I'm not being overly dramatic. That was hard.
Hmm.
I think it helps us to reframe that and take control of the situation, but I don't know about you. I blamed myself. And
Hmm.
that was really hard for years because it came with shame. And then once I started to talk to a therapist and you and I talked, and I started to see things differently and more on top of it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's good. And that's a natural piece, especially when it's a personal piece. And that's why I feel my story resonates when I do my speaking. Interestingly, I have almost more men than women come up to me after that
Really?
share that they can relate or they've been through something like, and it's like you're saying, I think because from my side, it wasn't a family member, it wasn't, a stepdad or an uncle or, even
Hmm.
I don't know, something with someone you've had a personal relationship with. Mine was clearly a bad guy. Mine was clearly a crime,
It
right?
was random. You couldn't have seen that coming. Nobody could have.
No, no, exactly. So that changes the ownership too, in some ways, right? Where the shame and stuff, is often attached when there's that personal connection. And I
Yeah.
think that's also the way my story lands and the way I can tell it after doing a lot of work, mind you. I didn't start out feeling that this was something I could smile and talk about. But
Yeah.
I think because I have that removed connection to the bad guy, I think it lands differently with the audience, particularly the male audience,
Hmm.
because it's more the impact I tried to get at of what it was rather than the actual story details themselves, if that makes any sense.
Yep, it
Yeah,
does.
I know.
Did you feel that, I know that the first sign of perimenopause, which was a misdiagnosis, kind of led you to this revelation, this talking to your therapist, and thank God it did.
Yeah.
Do you think that as you are in midlife now, you have more courage, more confidence, more conviction to face this and do what you're doing? Do you think you could have done that years ago when you were younger? And I don't mean the distance between when it happened and now. I mean the strength and courage. Like I feel a different confidence in midlife that I did not have decades ago.
It's a very good question. Do I have more confidence now? Well, I guess the short answer would be yes, because I'm doing it. I'm talking about it. I am not a public speaker by any sense of my ambition. I am a writer at heart and I love to be in control of my words. And that is how they go out there. For me, it's a combination of what my community saw in me. So none of us are in this alone, and having the right people around you to bring that out makes a huge difference in, as you're saying, creating a confidence. I had a writing mentor whose background was CBC radio, and he was the one who said, we need to tell this in a podcast. He said he liked how I told the story as opposed to how I wrote it. When I was writing, I was
Like,
like, I'm going to write my memoir, and this is, he's going to help me get an agent, and we're going to do this. And as he was coaching me, and he's a successful writer, he's published, has a memoir that was published many years ago and has won all kinds of Canadian awards. And anyway, so like he's got some cred behind him. So I trust him. And so he liked how I told it. So he basically produced my podcast, but more in the sense of not necessarily this conversation like we're having, but more of these almost CBC esque documentaries. And in my storytelling, again, this is my own therapy that I'm doing. And having that support combined with telling the story in a way that I had control over, I think really helped to build that confidence, right? And help me to trust my own voice, as you say. And so I keep going back to this. I always go back to this owning your story, owning your story. And what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to trauma dump and get your own whatever podcast or, write a big Facebook post or anything like that. But whatever that means to you, I guess, in releasing what is maybe contributing to not keeping you well,
Mm.
right? But midlife, serendipitously, I had just happened to me midlife when it's all happening. And yeah, you do go through a point, just even being a mother, you just go through a point where you don't care anymore because it's not about you. And there's a bigger picture out there. And I think that has really manifested quite strongly in me too. We realize we have a finite time in this earth and just F it.
Do you think that has helped take some power away from that experience?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's still there. Like, don't get me
Of
wrong.
course.
Even after this conversation, I do feel a big crash after releasing my story and or even talking about it. Depends on the format. I've been very careful about how I've been releasing it.
Mhm.
I have, for example, I did on Mother's Day, I was invited to be part of a panel of sorts that were the focus on people that have overcome adversity. And there was three of us. We were given questions. It was only going to be 10, 12 minutes each. And it was, my story of the surviving the kidnapping, another woman who was an immigrant who'd overcome a lot to do well in her business, and another woman who's become disabled through a spinal cord injury and how she's continuing to whatever. So very diverse. But the woman doing the interviewing, the moderator, was a very well-known broadcaster in BC, and she's retired now, but she was brought in to basically moderate and ask the questions. She went through the other two and asked them all their questions, and, I was prepared in my mind. When she came to me, she didn't ask me any of the questions. Her newscaster hat just naturally came back on. And she just wanted to go into the nitty gritty, ugly questions of what happened and what did he do? And oh, you must have been scared. And, how did he keep like those sorts of things that had nothing to do with the
No.
work that I'm doing now. I pretty much went to my car and I just felt like I'd been kicked in the gut, right? Like it was
Mhm. Well, you were
so,
blindsided too. Like, that's not fair.
but that's also like, maybe kind of a roundabout way to answer your question. Like, I'm not trying to be out there like, look at this, I've conquered my trauma, because you don't. It lives in you. And that's what I talked about in my TED talk. This story lives in me. Our
Mm.
stories live in us, and we have to recognize that not every day is going to be great in this, right? But we
Mhm.
have to trust. And that 9 days of being out there, I had to trust that I was going to be alive the next day, and maybe I'd go home. Oh no, not this day. Okay, maybe tomorrow,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. Could I ever do that again? No bloody way. And
Yeah.
if I was this age now and that ended up happening, I don't know.
Uh, you have tremendous strength as far as I can see. But yeah, it isn't the details of the story that are important. It is the fact that, and I know this from like talking to my own therapist, you can't erase the past, can't get rid of the story, but you can change the way you respond to it.
Yeah.
And that's about like triggers and, other things that we go through with PTSD and trauma and all that stuff.
It sounds hokey, and it is hokey. And I hate all these buzzwords that we have, but it works.
It does work. Of course it does. I
Yeah.
believe like it's for you, it's more than getting it off your chest. It's kind of like you said, you're doing your own therapy with
Hmm.
yourself when you do this as well as with someone else. So I love
Well,
that.
I am on disability. Do have and I don't normally publicly say this, but this was all part of what happened. I live with long-term PTSD. I don't have 40 hours a week in me. It is possible that I could feed into that and be somebody who is reliant on medications and can't get out of my story loop or whatever. And that is something that genuinely happens to people as well. Why I haven't gone there, I don't know. I've worked with some people that have helped me to recognize that. Do I go there sometimes? Yes. Does the perimenopause add a whole other line of
Oh,
BS to it all? Absolutely. Right. Like, so when it's all then understanding, why am I so sad today?
yeah.
What's going
Is it
on?
PTSD,
Yeah,
perimenopause?
I
What is
know.
it? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to separate that. There's so many overlapping issues. And I know with PTSD and perimenopause, there are also one can amplify the other.
Well,
So,
exactly. So, yeah, I guess my point is there are all kinds of answers. And my storytelling, my focus is more just this is what worked for me. And I never want to be like, I'm not a therapist. I'm
mhm,
not one to say this is exactly what anybody needs to do, but knowing that there are solutions out there that will fit you, that's like, and so having this conversation about people looking at like their hormones going bananas on them, this natural part of life, and then what about all of something that you maybe have been carrying all your life, right? And then
mhm.
you combine those two, and what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
Right?
being kicked when you're down. And we call this a natural part of life. But I think,
Yeah.
well, if it's such a natural part of life, why is the suicide rate so high, or used to be, particularly high for women going into
Yeah.
menopause when they didn't know it was menopause, right? I
Yeah.
saw more stats of that in the UK, which was shocking to me. Like they just thought these women did not know what was happening. They thought they were so deeply depressed or
Mm.
so anxious and so hopeless or doomsday. And yet, if someone had said to them, well, let's check your
Yeah.
estrogen levels, let's look at hormone therapy or cognitive behavioral, and just told them, like, you're not alone. This is normal, or this is not normal. This is one of the many things that can happen. I bet you could have saved some lives. And I think
Yeah.
going through this with zero information is really scary. And, you know, menopause, like everything else, the more we talk about it, the more we feel, okay, I can ask questions. It's a safe place now, you know?
Well, and nobody really understands this stuff until you've been there, right?
Hmm.
So, and that's in the hot flashes, but that's the tip of it all, right? So it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
nobody really understands unless you've been assaulted. No one can really ever say they understand you. They can
Mm.
empathize,
Mhm.
and that's great. But again, back to the sort of the storytelling and the info sharing, that's where the power is, I think, in seeing relatable pieces in maybe what someone else went through, right? Because we're all, I mean, face it, most of us mothers, like we're stubborn. We don't want to admit that something's trying to take us
What?
down.
No. Never been called that.
No, feisty, no way.
No. Bit much. Never.
No, exactly. I remember one time, anyway, I was trauma dumping at sort of a gathering of friends years ago. And that's where the word effusive became part of my vocabulary. This one guy that was there says to my friend, she's a bit effusive, isn't she?
Wow.
Yeah,
And
I
where did
know.
you bury his body?
I know exactly. No one will ever know.
I have one funny story. I remember you and I going up to that cabin in the Okanagan
Oh,
in
yeah.
Vernon,
Yeah.
and we were sitting out on that porch. It was getting dark, and all of a sudden, the roof above us started to move. Do you remember
Oh,
that? A
yes. The
thousand
bats.
million bat bums. And we ran in the house in the cabin, and they all flew. Ah, yeah. Never, ever have I forgotten that. One more question. Two questions. I lied. One,
Okay.
have you ever been asked to give a piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the most common piece of advice I get is such a nebulous question, and the answer is equally as nebulous. What would you tell somebody who's going through something similar? There's no real answer other than we have to believe that there is good and that the next day will be better. We just have to keep believing that and find that in ourselves because nobody's going to give it to us.
When it comes to some of the midlife struggles, particularly around perimenopause, there's a lot of this toxic positivity out there. There are some great things that come with midlife, but menopause can be, for the most part, a drag. And I think when we tell people it's positive, positive, and they don't feel positive, then they feel like something's wrong with their experience. And I think, you kind of mentioned this earlier, like you just have to have faith in the process. I mean, aside from getting the proper help and support, but there are going to be bad days. There are going to be good days.
And surrounding having the community and the power that we have in the communities that exist now. The luck that I had found this journalist guy or this my writing mentor, podcast producer, like we just get it at the places we don't realize, right? And this is a guy, and he's but he's been such an advocate and believer in my story, and he doesn't ever counsel me, but he tells me how much what I'm doing is helping him, like because we went back to the camp where I was kept,
You
and
did?
I didn't. Oh, I never
Oh,
shared.
yeah. I saw
Yes,
that picture.
yeah,
Oh, God. Okay.
that was so
I didn't
him and
realize
his
that
C
was like in the here and now.
that was, I guess, 2 years ago we did that, right? And that was his thing. I mean, I'm kind of going off track, but I guess it goes back to community, right? And we just being open to what other people are maybe saying that we wouldn't expect to be helpful, I guess. Because years ago he said to me, you know what, and he's like this, journalist at heart, multimedia kind of guy, and he says we got to get cameras someday and go right, but go back into the woods where you were. And I'm like, yeah, right, that's never gonna happen. And
Mhm. She said with a smile.
and I'm like, sure, just put that in my pocket. And but yeah, then there was just one day, I think it was early 2024, I want to say. And I was like, JJ, we got to go do this. I think I want to do this. It was so powerful. It was a way to physically go back there. Like I've gone back there, and that's part of the PTSD therapy. But physically, if you can have a chance to, and you're strong enough to go back to face something, it was just so powerful. And then to have somebody film me, it was bizarre.
Oh, wow. That takes a lot of guts. Not sure
Yeah.
I could do that. But I think, having the confidence to do that and know that you're going to go back to that place and be okay
Yeah.
and you're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I didn't do this just on my own, and I had community around me. I'm involved with all different groups. The fact that we can, virtually through like what you're doing, and we're on our using our feeds for good because the algorithms are going to feed us whatever we feed it that we're looking at, right?
Hmm.
I have another friend of a friend going through she's same age as me, going through, she was an alcoholic. Marriage was really bad due to the addiction stuff. Anyway, the marriage ended, and she is struggling still through that. Plus, she's going through perimenopause. Plus, there's this childhood stuff, and I'm connected with her on Facebook, and I just see what she shares. And it's stuff that would never come up on my feed. But somehow she just doesn't have the community around her. And this is where the algorithms and the AI work against her. And
Yeah.
they just keep digging her into that hole. And everything that she's sharing is just perpetuating the issue. So to me, if there is a piece of advice, it'd be like just watch what you're consuming. There's another talk that I'm doing that really is about that, right? Just what we feed ourselves in a physical sense, but from a psychological sense, we've got so much around us. We just have to be smart to choose the stuff that's psychologically imprinting itself in a way that might be damaging.
So here's a mind game for you. I asked AI the other day how to combat the algorithm because I mean, I'm getting flooded with Trump and JD Vance and everything, right? Like
Wow.
everything from the US. And I get sucked in. And
Yeah.
I'm like, now it's all I see, and I don't want to see it anymore. And it says, when you see stuff like that on Instagram or Facebook, or whatever,
Yeah.
you scroll past as quick as you can so that if you pause, the algorithm
Hmm.
picks it up. And obviously, you don't engage, but you start engaging with content you want more of, like
Yes.
liking
Yes.
it, sharing it, commenting, whatever, and start following those pages. But also, if you leave social media altogether for something like 8 days in a row, it
Wow.
resets your algorithm. And I don't know that it resets it completely, but still, like, it just made me think we need to do this because I don't
Hmm.
want this crap in my feed. It like gets me angry reading about what's happening, and it
Yeah.
makes me feel powerless, and that makes me feel scared. And when I feel scared, I feel angry, like blah 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 blah. It's not good for anyone's mental health. So that's great advice. And I think you're right about community. I just did a blog post about the science behind happiness. And one of the things they
Nice.
say is that when women spend time with their friends, it is the best hormone therapy.
Yeah.
It like resets you. So even when you're, like when I'm torturing you with my bad jokes or bad stories, you don't know it, but I am literally saving your life with those
Oh, I
bad
know.
stories.
Well, when we had that gathering in Toronto too, like most of us were strangers, right?
Yeah.
But just the power of just, the 12 of us or whatever in that room and just having that way to connect in a group that was supportive. But we did have one who needed more support than the rest of us. So that's part of my work too, is trying to help to create a space that has the resources that it provably can help people, which is similar to what you're doing, but also then bring people together, right? So, and particularly women, but I do find when I've had my gatherings, I call them truth talks, I have had all ages and backgrounds and genders that are showing up. But my goal is to really look at more the common thread of why we're there. And it's more the issue, the impact, and the fact that everybody wants answers on how we keep going because the world's not necessarily set up to keep on a
Well, I would
positive
say
path.
that like everything that has happened to you has come together now, and you are really, really good at building community. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that you know how important it is to get you through.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough, Lenore. We talked about this for years. We were going to get you to write the book and do the thing, but I like these personal conversations more. And
Yeah.
thank you
Wow.
for sharing that because, it's easy to feel like the world is going to end when something happens. And sometimes we just need to know that, we all have this strength somewhere in us to survive. We have that natural instinct to try and survive. And like you said, it's not easy and there will be really shitty days, but then there will be good ones, like the one right now.
I have to. That's what I say. Someone's like, "How are you? Today's a great day." How about that? We'll go with that. Yesterday, maybe not so much.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine. I
Yeah.
hide at my office on those days.
Well, and the only last thing I'll say is, because that's one thing that I've always found an affinity with you in is the sense of humor and the sass and the sarcasm, right? And the ability to smile when it's something that we shouldn't be smiling about. And I know with you and I, it's not toxic positivity. Through my Toastmasters group, this came up and how I talk about really crappy things, but I find a way, even through my TED Talk, to bring in
Yes.
like, and it's not necessarily me trying to make light of it. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of comes out natural. So that's a natural affinity we have in the art of sarcasm. We
There
have
is
to
an
do it.
art to it, by the way. I don't think
Yeah.
people really appreciate what we do
No,
very well. No, that'll be your next talk.
that's it. I'm making a note right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Lenore, and I love
Thank you, honey. It's good to see you. Wish I could give you a squish.
you.
Mwah.